The first time Juliana Gray saw his paintings, she forgot how to breathe. She'd been walking past the small community gallery on 10th Street, the one wedged between a bodega and a laundromat, when the colors stopped her cold. Bold strokes of crimson and gold against deep navy, a swirling chaos that somehow created perfect order. The painting showed a city skyline at dusk, but it wasn't any city she recognized. It was emotion made visible, loneliness and hope tangled together. Juliana pushed open the gallery door, the bell chiming softly. Inside, the space was cramped and slightly dusty, walls covered with local artists' work. Most of it was mediocre at best, the kind of art that filled community spaces because the artists paid for wall time. But those paintings in the window, those were different. "Can I help you?" A young woman with purple-streaked hair looked up from behind a desk cluttered with flyers. "The paintings in the window," Juliana said. "Who's the artist?" "Oh, those are Nathan's. Nathan Novak. He's actually here, doing some touch-ups on the frames." She gestured toward the back corner where a man knelt on the floor, paintbrush in hand, carefully working on a frame that had seen better days. Juliana approached slowly. The man didn't look up, too absorbed in his work. He wore paint-stained jeans and a faded gray t-shirt, his dark hair slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck. His hands moved with practiced precision, the brush barely whispering against the wood. "Excuse me," Juliana said softly. He glanced up, and she found herself staring into the greenest eyes she'd ever seen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He stood, unfolding to his full height, easily 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that strained against his shirt. "Hi," he said, his voice warm and slightly rough. "Sorry, I get lost in the details sometimes. Your paintings," Juliana managed, "they're incredible." A genuine smile crossed his face, transforming it from handsome to absolutely stunning. "Thank you, that means a lot. How much for the one in the window, the cityscape?" The smile faltered slightly. "That one's $1,200. Juliana tried not to wince. She'd just gotten promoted to senior editor at the publishing house where she worked, but $1,200 was still a stretch. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed that painting, needed to see it every day. "I'll take it," she said before she could talk herself out of it. Nathan's eyebrows shot up. "Really, I mean, that's great. That's amazing." He set down the brush and wiped his hands on his already paint-covered jeans. "Let me get the paperwork. I'm Nathan, by the way. Juliana." His handshake was firm, his palm calloused. Artist's hands, she thought. There was something grounding about him, something real that she hadn't felt in a long time living in the city. As Nathan filled out the sales slip, Juliana studied the other paintings. Each one had that same quality, that ability to reach inside and pull at something deep. One showed a woman standing alone in a field of wildflowers, her face turned toward the sun. Another captured a train station at night, empty tracks stretching into darkness while a single light burned in the distance. "You have a real gift," Juliana said. "Have you shown in any major galleries?" Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've tried. It's tough to break into that world. Most of the big galleries want names they recognize, not some guy painting in his cramped apartment." He handed her the receipt. "I can help you carry it to your car if you want." "I took the subway, but I only live 6 blocks from here. I can manage." "Let me help anyway. It's heavier than it looks and the frame corners can be sharp." They walked together through the cooling September evening, Nathan carrying the painting wrapped in brown paper while Juliana navigated with her keys ready. She lived on the 4th floor of a walk-up, and by the 3rd landing, Nathan wasn't even breathing hard. "You must be in good shape," Juliana said, slightly winded. "I do a lot of physical work at the warehouse. Pays the bills between art sales." He said it matter-of-factly, without shame or bitterness. Her apartment was small but filled with books and light. She'd spent years making it feel like home, with soft throws and plants on every surface and a reading nook by the window. Nathan carried the painting inside and helped her decide where to hang it, finally settling on the wall opposite her couch, where she'd see it every time she came home. "Perfect," Juliana said, stepping back to admire it. Even in the warm lamplight of her apartment, the painting seemed to glow. Nathan stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "This is what I love most, seeing where the art ends up, making sure it finds the right home. Would you like some coffee?" Juliana asked, surprising herself. She didn't usually invite strange men into her apartment, but Nathan didn't feel like a stranger. "I'd love some." They sat at her small kitchen table, and Juliana learned that Nathan had been painting since he was a kid, that he'd studied art in college but dropped out when his father got sick, and he needed to work full-time. He talked about art with a passion that made his whole face light up, and Juliana found herself leaning forward, captivated. "What about you?" Nathan asked. "What do you do when you're not buying overpriced paintings from desperate artists?" She laughed. "I'm an editor at Meridian Publishing. Mostly literary fiction, some poetry collections. It's my dream job, actually." "So you appreciate art in all its forms." "I try to, though I'll be honest, nothing I've read lately has moved me the way your painting did." The conversation flowed easily, naturally. An hour passed, then two. Nathan told her about growing up in a small town upstate, about moving to the city 5 years ago with nothing but a duffel bag and determination. Juliana shared stories about her own journey from Ohio, about the loneliness of making it in New York, about finding beauty in unexpected places. When Nathan finally left, it was past midnight. At the door, he hesitated. "Would you maybe want to get dinner sometime? I promise I'll shower and wear something without paint on it." "I'd like that," Juliana said, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "Friday night, perfect." She watched him disappear down the stairs, then closed the door and leaned against it, grinning like an idiot. The painting caught her eye from across the room, and she felt like maybe, just maybe, something important had just begun. The next morning at work, Juliana couldn't focus. Her mind kept drifting back to green eyes and paint-stained hands, and the way Nathan talked about art like it was breathing. Her best friend and coworker, Michelle, noticed immediately. "Okay, spill," Michelle said, perching on the edge of Juliana's desk. "You've been staring at that manuscript for 20 minutes without turning a page." "I met someone," Juliana admitted, and he's an artist. A real one, not just someone who calls himself that. His work is extraordinary, Michelle. And he's funny and kind, and we talked for hours, and I haven't felt like this in forever." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "When do I get to meet this paragon?" "We have a date on Friday." "Wait, you just met him?" "Last night. I bought one of his paintings." "You bought art from a guy you just met and then invited him into your apartment. Jules, that's so unlike you." Juliana shrugged helplessly. "I know, but it felt right. He felt right." Friday arrived after what felt like the longest week of Juliana's life. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Nathan had texted her the address of a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place tourists never found. He was waiting outside when she arrived, and her breath caught. He'd cleaned up beautifully, wearing dark jeans and a button-down shirt that was actually ironed, his hair still damp from the shower. But it was the smile on his face when he saw her that made her knees weak. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The restaurant was tiny and perfect, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. They ordered pasta and wine and fell into conversation as easily as they had in her apartment. Nathan told her about the new series he was working on, inspired by the people he saw on his morning commute. "Everyone has a story," he said, twirling spaghetti on his fork. "You can see it in their faces, in the way they hold themselves. I try to capture that moment, that feeling of being completely alone in a crowd of thousands." "Is that how you feel?" Juliana asked quietly. Nathan met her eyes. "Sometimes. Less so lately." The air between them felt charged, electric. Juliana wanted to reach across the table and touch his hand, but she held back, afraid of moving too fast. "Tell me about the best book you've ever edited," Nathan said. Juliana thought for a moment. "Last year we published a debut novel about a woman who loses her memory in an accident and has to piece together her life through the objects in her apartment. It was heartbreaking and beautiful, and working with that author reminded me why I love what I do. We get to help bring stories into the world. That's how I feel about painting," Nathan said. "Every piece is a story, even if the viewer interprets it differently than I intended. That's the magic of it." After dinner, they walked through the city, weaving between tourists and locals, talking and laughing. Nathan pointed out details she'd never noticed: the way light hit certain buildings, the patterns in the sidewalk, the architectural flourishes high above street level. "You see the world differently," Juliana said. "I just notice things. Most people are too busy rushing to actually look." They ended up in Washington Square Park, sitting on a bench and watching street performers. A man played guitar while his dog danced on hind legs, and Nathan laughed, a full, genuine sound that made Juliana want to hear it again and again. "This might be the best first date I've ever had," she admitted. "Only might be," Nathan teased, but his eyes were serious. "Definitely the best." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. His palm was warm and solid, and Juliana felt something settle inside her chest, like a key turning in a lock. They started seeing each other regularly after that. Nathan would show up at her apartment with takeout and sketches to show her, or she'd visit him at the tiny studio he rented in Brooklyn, watching him paint while she read manuscripts. His space was cramped and cluttered, barely big enough for an easel and a mattress on the floor, but it was filled with light and creativity. "I know it's not much," Nathan said the first time she visited, looking embarrassed. "It's perfect," Juliana said honestly. "It's you." She loved watching him work, the way he got completely absorbed, how he'd step back and tilt his head, considering. Sometimes he'd ask her opinion, and Juliana learned to trust her instincts to say when something felt off or when it took her breath away. "You have a good eye," Nathan told her one afternoon, adding a streak of gold to a canvas. "Most people just say everything's nice. You actually see." "I learned from the best," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. One Saturday, Nathan took her to a street fair in Queens where local artists sold their work. He knew almost everyone there, greeting them with easy familiarity, introducing Juliana as his girlfriend. The word sent a thrill through her even though they'd never officially defined what they were to each other. "That's Nathan Novak," she heard one vendor whisper to another. "I heard he turned down a gallery offer from Chelsea last year." "Really? Why would anyone do that? Pride, I guess." "He wants to make it on his own terms." Juliana filed the information away but didn't mention it to Nathan. She understood pride, understood wanting to succeed because of talent rather than connections or luck. They'd been together for 2 months when Nathan's roommate's situation fell apart. The friend he'd been living with got a job in Boston and moved out with only 2 weeks' notice, leaving Nathan scrambling for rent. "I might have to give up the studio," Nathan told her over coffee, his frustration evident. I can't afford both places on my warehouse salary and the sporadic art sales. Move in with me, Juliana said before she could overthink it. Nathan stared at her. Jules, we've only been together a couple months. I know, but I have space and you need it. Besides, you're at my place half the time anyway. We could split rent and utilities and you'd still have your studio. I don't want you to think I'm using you. I don't think that. I know you're not that person. She reached across the table and took his hand. Let me help, please. Nathan moved in the following week, bringing his few possessions in cardboard boxes. He didn't have much, just clothes and art supplies and a worn copy of Hemingway's stories. Juliana cleared space in her closet and dresser, and slowly the apartment became theirs instead of just hers. Living together felt natural, easy. Nathan would make coffee in the morning while Juliana showered, and she'd proofread manuscripts while he sketched at the kitchen table. They developed routines, small intimacies that felt more significant than grand gestures. One evening, Juliana came home to find Nathan cooking, something ambitious involving pasta from scratch. He wore an apron over his jeans, flour dusting his forearms, and Juliana's heart clenched with how much she loved him. "What's the occasion?" she asked, setting down her work bag. "No occasion. I just wanted to do something nice for you." He looked up from the cutting board where he was slicing tomatoes. "You've been so amazing, Jules, letting me stay here, supporting my art, never making me feel like I'm not enough. Nathan, you are enough. You're more than enough." He set down the knife and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I've wanted to say it for weeks, but I was scared." "I love you too," Juliana whispered, and when he kissed her, she tasted flower and hope and forever. That night marked a shift in their relationship. The walls came down completely, and they shared everything, dreams and fears and memories. Nathan told her about his father's death, how it had derailed his plans but also taught him resilience. Juliana opened up about her own losses, the mother who'd never understood her choices, the relationships that had failed because she'd chosen her career. "You don't have to choose with me," Nathan said. "I love your ambition. I love watching you fall in love with manuscripts, the way you fight for the books you believe in. Don't ever dim that light." As fall turned to winter, they built a life together. Nathan got a solo show at a slightly bigger gallery in Brooklyn, and Juliana took the day off to help him hang the pieces. The opening was packed, and Juliana stood to the side, bursting with pride as strangers admired Nathan's work. "Your boyfriend is incredibly talented," a woman in an expensive coat said to Juliana. "Where did he study?" "He's mostly self-taught," Juliana said. "Everything you see comes from raw talent and years of practice." The woman looked impressed, even more remarkable. 3 paintings sold that night, enough for Nathan to cover his share of rent for 2 months and buy Juliana the nicest dinner they'd had since their first date. "I should be treating you," Juliana protested. "This is your victory." "Our victory," Nathan corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you believing in me." But as winter deepened, Juliana started noticing small inconsistencies. Nathan's phone would ring at odd hours, and he'd step into the other room to take the call, voice low and tense. Once, she'd picked up a package delivered to their apartment addressed to him, and when she handed it to him, he'd seemed almost panicked before hiding it in the closet. "What was that about?" she'd asked, confused by his reaction. "Just some supplies I ordered." "I wanted to surprise you with something." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about it felt off. Then there was the day she'd been cleaning and found a receipt that had fallen behind the dresser. It was from an expensive restaurant in Manhattan, dated from before they'd met, showing a bill for over $2,000. Juliana told herself not to be paranoid. Maybe Nathan had splurged for a special occasion, or maybe it was a work dinner from before he'd left whatever job he'd had. Still, the small discrepancies piled up, creating a background hum of uncertainty. One Saturday in January, Michelle invited them to a dinner party at her place. Her boyfriend worked in finance, and most of the guests were from that world, polished and wealthy and talking about things Juliana only half understood. Nathan seemed uncomfortable, nursing a single beer and staying quiet. "You okay?" Juliana whispered during a lull in conversation. "Yeah, just not really my scene. All this talk about money and investments. Mine either," she admitted. "Want to leave after dinner. Desperately." But as they were gathering their coats to go, one of Michelle's boyfriend's friends, a man named Richard, stopped Nathan. "Hey, don't I know you?" "You look really familiar." Nathan's face went carefully blank. "I don't think so." "No, I'm sure of it. Did you go to Wharton?" "Or maybe I've seen you at the club." "Wrong guy," Nathan said firmly, then guided Juliana out the door. In the cab home, he was quiet, staring out the window at the passing lights. Juliana wanted to ask what was wrong, but something held her back. Instead, she reached for his hand, and after a moment, he squeezed her fingers. The next morning, Nathan was up early, already dressed when Juliana woke up. "I have to run some errands," he said, kissing her forehead. "I'll be back this afternoon." "Want company?" "No, it's boring stuff. Meetings about warehouse schedules. Stay here where it's warm." After he left, Juliana tried to shake off the unease that had settled over her. She made coffee and settled in with a manuscript, but she couldn't focus. Finally, she did something she'd never done before, something that made her feel guilty even as she did it. She opened Nathan's laptop. It wasn't locked, which somehow made her feel worse. She told herself she was just looking for reassurance, for proof that her paranoia was unfounded. But what she found instead shook her to her core. The browser history showed searches for art galleries, but not the small community spaces Nathan showed at. These were major galleries in Chelsea and Soho, places that represented famous artists. There were also searches for luxury real estate and financial management services. Then she found a folder labeled simply Work. Inside were hundreds of images, paintings that took her breath away. They were Nathan's style, unmistakably his hand, but these were different. Bigger, more ambitious, more refined. And each file name included a sale price that made her dizzy. $50,000, $120,000, $250,000. Her hands shaking, Juliana opened a new browser tab and searched for Nathan's name. The results made the room spin. Nathan Novak wasn't a struggling artist. He was one of the most successful contemporary painters in the country. He'd had solo shows at prestigious galleries in New York, Los Angeles, and London. His work had been featured in major art magazines and collected by celebrities and museums. There were photos of him at gallery openings in expensive suits, shaking hands with famous actors and business moguls. One article was particularly detailed, outlining his rise from a working-class background to art world sensation, noting that his father's death had motivated him to succeed at any cost. It mentioned that his paintings now sold for six figures, and that his estimated net worth was somewhere in the tens of millions. Juliana closed the laptop and sat in stunned silence. Nothing made sense. Why would someone famous and successful pretend to be struggling? Why live in her small apartment when he could clearly afford his own place, probably somewhere much nicer? Why work at a warehouse when he didn't need to? The betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd experienced. For months, she'd supported him emotionally and financially, worried about his career, celebrated his small victories. And all along, He'd been lying to her. When Nathan came home that afternoon, Juliana was waiting on the couch, his laptop open on the coffee table. His face went pale when he saw the screen. "Jules, I can explain. You're a famous artist." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "You're successful and wealthy, and you've been lying to me this entire time." "I haven't been lying, not exactly." "Not exactly, Nathan. I found articles about you. Photos of you at fancy galleries. Information about paintings selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. How is that not lying?" He sat down heavily in the chair across from her, running his hands through his hair. "When I met you, I was taking a break. I was burned out from the art world, from everyone wanting something from me, from relationships that only existed because of my money and fame. I wanted to remember what it felt like to create art just for the joy of it, without all the pressure and expectations. So you pretended to be poor. You let me worry about you making rent. You let me feel like I was helping you when you didn't need any help at all. I never meant to hurt you." His voice cracked. "At first, it was supposed to be temporary. I was just hiding out for a few weeks, showing some work at small galleries under my real name, because I wanted to see if people would respond to the art itself, not the reputation. But then I met you, and you looked at my paintings and saw them, really saw them, without knowing anything about who I was supposed to be. Do you have any idea how rare that is? So you decided to keep lying." "I fell in love with you," Nathan said desperately. "I fell in love with how you talked about books, with your laugh, with the way you see beauty everywhere. And I was terrified that if you knew the truth, everything would change. You'd start seeing me as Nathan Novak, the famous artist, instead of just Nathan." "You didn't give me the chance to make that choice," Juliana said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You decided for both of us. Do you know how that feels? I supported you. I invited you to live with me. I celebrated every small sale like it was a miracle. And all along you were just playing pretend with my life. It wasn't pretend. My feelings were never pretend." Nathan moved to kneel in front of her, but Juliana stood up, putting distance between them. "I need you to leave. Jules, please, let's talk about this. We are talking about it, and I'm telling you I need space. I need to think, and I can't do that with you here." Nathan's face crumpled, but he nodded. Okay, I'll go, but please don't give up on us. Let me fix this." He packed a bag and left within 20 minutes. After the door closed behind him, Juliana collapsed on the couch and sobbed. She cried for the relationship she'd thought they had, for the trust that had been shattered, for the future she'd imagined that now felt like a fantasy. The next few days were torture. Nathan texted constantly, apologizing and explaining and begging for another chance. Juliana didn't respond. She called in sick to work and spent hours staring at the cityscape painting on her wall, the one that had started everything. It looked different now, knowing the truth about who had created it. Michelle came over with wine and takeout, letting Juliana pour out the whole story. "That's insane," Michelle said. "I mean, I understand him wanting a break from fame, but to keep it secret for months, that's beyond messed up." "I keep replaying everything," Juliana said, curled up in a blanket, wondering what was real and what was performance. Did he really love me, or was I just part of his escape fantasy? From what you've told me about how he looked at you, how he treated you, I think his feelings were real. The circumstances were fake, but the emotions probably weren't. How can I trust that?" "I don't know," Michelle admitted. "That's something only you can figure out." A week after Nathan left, Juliana was walking home from the office when she passed a newsstand. A glossy art magazine caught her eye, and there on the cover was Nathan, looking serious and professional in a black suit. The headline read, "Nathan Novak breaks his silence, the mysterious 6-month disappearance that changed everything." Juliana bought the magazine and read the interview in a coffee shop, her hands shaking. Nathan talked candidly about feeling suffocated by success, about how the art world had stopped feeling like a community and started feeling like a business. He spoke about needing to rediscover his passion by stripping away everything extraneous. Then, toward the end of the interview, he talked about falling in love. "I met someone who saw my work without any context or preconceptions," he told the interviewer. She responded to the paintings as pure art, and that was incredibly freeing. "She reminded me why I started creating in the first place. But I made mistakes in how I handled the situation, and I'm living with the consequences of those choices. If I could do it over, I'd be honest from the start, even if it meant risking rejection." She deserved that honesty. The interviewer had pressed him about whether he was currently in a relationship, and Nathan had simply said, "I hope so. I really, really hope so." Juliana closed the magazine and stared out the coffee shop window. People rushed past, everyone absorbed in their own lives, their own dramas. She thought about what Michelle had said, about emotions being real even when circumstances weren't. She thought about all the moments with Nathan that had felt genuine, the late-night conversations and the way he'd held her when she cried over a manuscript that hadn't worked out. The lie was enormous, unforgivable even. But was love enough to overcome it? That night, Juliana did something impulsive. She looked up Nathan's real address, the one listed in a business directory for his studio. It was in a converted warehouse in Tribeca, the kind of place with 12-foot ceilings and enormous windows. She took the subway there and stood outside for 20 minutes, gathering courage. Finally, she pressed the buzzer. "Hello?" Nathan's voice came through the speaker, rough with exhaustion. "It's me." A long pause, then the door buzzed open. Juliana climbed 3 flights of stairs and found Nathan waiting in an open doorway. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept or shaved in days. The studio behind him was massive, filled with canvases in various stages of completion. "I read your interview," Juliana said. "I meant every word." She walked past him into the studio, taking in the space. These were clearly his real working conditions, nothing like the cramped room in Brooklyn. The paintings were extraordinary, complex pieces that must have taken hundreds of hours. "This is who you really are," she said, gesturing around. "No." Nathan closed the door and faced her. "This is what I do, but it's not who I am. Who I am is the guy who makes you coffee in the morning and listens to you read passages from manuscripts and burns dinner because he's trying too hard. That's real, Jules. That's the most real I've ever been. You lied to me for months. I know. There's no excuse for that, no justification. I was selfish and scared and I hurt you, but everything else was true. The way I feel about you, the life we built together, that was all completely genuine." Juliana walked to the window, looking out over the city lights. "When I bought your painting that first day, it was because something about it spoke to me. It felt honest, like I was seeing something real and vulnerable. Finding out you lied makes me question everything, including my own judgment." "Your judgment was perfect," Nathan said quietly. "You saw the truth in the art, even if you didn't know the circumstances around it. That's what makes you so special, Jules. You see clearly." She turned to face him. "If we're going to have any chance at fixing this, you have to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more half-truths. I need complete honesty." "Anything," Nathan said immediately. "Ask me anything." They sat on the floor of his studio, backs against the wall, and Nathan told her everything. About inheriting money from his father's life insurance and using it to launch his career. About the early struggles before he broke through, about the surreal experience of suddenly being sought after by everyone. About relationships that fell apart when he realized people wanted his fame and money more than they wanted him. I got cynical, he admitted. I started testing people, seeing how they'd react if they thought I was nobody. Most failed spectacularly. Then I met you and you didn't fail. You just saw the art and appreciated it for what it was. And when we talked, you were interested in my thoughts and dreams, not my bank account or connections. I would have been interested in you regardless, Juliana said. Rich or poor, famous or unknown, I fell in love with who you are as a person. You should have trusted me enough to let me make that decision. I know, I was a coward. Why did you really move in with me? You clearly didn't need to for financial reasons. Nathan looked down at his hands. Because I wanted more time with you, and I was terrified that if I told you the truth, you'd pull away. So I took the coward's route and let you believe the story I'd created. Every day I told myself I'd come clean, and every day I chickened out because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you. You almost did lose me, Juliana said softly. You still might. I know. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging between them. Finally, Juliana spoke. I need time. I need to figure out if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild on a foundation of honesty instead of lies. How much time? Nathan asked, and she could hear the fear in his voice. I don't know, but I need you to be patient with me, to let me work through this at my own pace. Can you do that? I'd wait forever if that's what it takes. Juliana stood and Nathan scrambled to his feet. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, I do still love you. I'm just not sure if love is enough right now. It's worth everything, Nathan said, and I'll be here whenever you're ready. The next few weeks were strange. Juliana threw herself into work, editing a novel about second chances that felt a little too on the nose. Nathan respected her request for space, though he sent a single text each morning. Good morning. I hope you have a beautiful day. Nothing else, no pressure or demands, just a simple statement. Juliana never responded, but she read each message and slowly the anger began to fade, replaced by something more complicated. She found herself thinking about Nathan's paintings, about the vulnerability required to create something and put it out into the world, about how scary it must be to wonder if people loved you or the idea of you. It didn't excuse the lying, but it helped her understand it. One Saturday, Juliana went to a major gallery in Chelsea where Nathan had a show. She'd seen it advertised and decided she needed to experience his work in this context, to see what she'd missed. The gallery was intimidating, all white walls and hushed voices, people dressed in expensive clothes discussing art in pretentious tones. But the paintings themselves were breathtaking. These were clearly from a different period, before Nathan's time playing at being unknown. They were technically perfect, but somehow less alive than the pieces she'd seen in the community gallery. Beautiful but safe, lacking the raw emotion of the later work. Stunning, aren't they? A woman in a designer suit appeared beside Juliana, though I actually prefer his newer pieces. He disappeared for 6 months last year, and the work he's done since coming back has this incredible emotional depth. It's like he rediscovered something essential. What do you mean? Juliana asked. There's a piece in his studio that I saw during a private showing. A portrait of a woman reading by a window, light falling across her face. It's the most honest thing he's ever created. Apparently he won't sell it, says it's not for sale at any price because the subject means too much to him. Juliana's breath caught. Do you know who she is? No idea. He's been very private about his personal life lately. But whoever she is, she inspired something extraordinary in him. After the woman moved on, Juliana stood in front of a cityscape similar to the one Nathan had sold her, but this earlier version lacked something. It was pretty but not profound. The painting in her apartment, the one created during his time away, had soul. She thought about what the woman had said, about Nathan painting her portrait and refusing to sell it, about her being the subject that meant too much. Despite everything, warmth bloomed in her chest. That evening, Juliana called Michelle. "I think I want to forgive him. Are you sure?" "No, but I love him and I think he really loves me. He made a terrible mistake, but everyone deserves a second chance, right?" "Some mistakes are too big," Michelle said carefully. "But only you can decide if this is one of them." After hanging up, Juliana did something she'd been avoiding. She went to the closet and pulled out the package Nathan had hidden, the one he'd seemed panicked about. Inside was a small wooden box, handcrafted and beautiful. She opened it to find a delicate silver necklace with a tiny paintbrush charm, and beneath it, a folded piece of paper. She recognized Nathan's handwriting immediately. "For Jules," it read, "because you've colored my world in ways I never imagined. I was going to give this to you on our 3-month anniversary, but I lost my courage. Every day I wanted to tell you the truth, and every day I was too afraid. You deserve someone braver, someone honest, but I hope you'll let me try to become that person. All my love, Nathan." The paper was dated 2 months earlier, around the time they'd first talked about moving in together. Juliana held the necklace and cried, not from sadness but from the complicated mix of love and hurt and hope. The next morning, she texted Nathan for the first time in 3 weeks. "Can we talk?" He responded immediately. "Anytime, anywhere, your studio. This afternoon." When Juliana arrived, Nathan was waiting anxiously by the door. He looked better than the last time she'd seen him, though still worn around the edges. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "I found the necklace," Juliana said without preamble, "and I read your note." Nathan winced. "That was supposed to be a surprise." "It was." She pulled the necklace from her purse. "Will you put it on me?" His hands shook as he fastened the clasp, his fingers gentle against the back of her neck. Juliana turned to face him, and she saw everything in his eyes, love and regret and desperate hope. "I'm not saying everything is fixed," she said, "but I want to try. I want to see if we can build something real, based on complete honesty this time." "Yes," Nathan said immediately. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes, I'll be completely transparent about everything." "Show me the portrait," Juliana said. "The one you painted of me." Nathan led her to the back corner of the studio where a canvas stood covered with a cloth. He pulled it away carefully, revealing the painting. Juliana gasped. It was her, sitting by the window in her apartment, sunlight streaming through and catching in her hair. She held a book in her lap but wasn't reading, instead gazing out at something beyond the frame with a soft smile on her face. She looked beautiful and real and completely at peace. "When did you paint this?" she whispered. "Over about 3 weeks. You were so absorbed in that manuscript you were reading that you never noticed me sketching. I'd work on it when you were at the office." He stood beside her, looking at the painting. "This is how I see you, Jules. This is who you are to me. It's extraordinary." "You're extraordinary." Nathan turned to her, taking both her hands. "I know I have a lot to prove. I know trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But I swear to you, I will spend every day showing you that you can believe in me again." "I want to meet the real you," Juliana said. "Not the struggling artist persona, not the poor guy from Brooklyn. I want to know Nathan Novak, the successful artist, the guy who grew up in a small town and lost his father and fought his way to the top. All of it, the good and the complicated and everything in between." "Okay," Nathan said. "That's fair. It might not be as interesting as you think. Let me be the judge of that." They spent the afternoon talking, really talking. Nathan showed her his older work, explained his creative process, talked about the pressures of the art world and the loneliness of success. He told her about gallery openings where he'd felt like a performing monkey, about relationships where women had been more interested in being seen with him than actually knowing him. "I understand being lonely in a crowd," Juliana said. "That's part of why I moved to New York. In my hometown, everyone knew me as the girl who wanted to leave, who thought she was too good for where she came from. Here, I could be whoever I wanted to be." "And who did you want to be?" "Someone who mattered. Someone who helped bring beautiful things into the world." She smiled slightly. "Turns out we're not that different, you and I." As evening fell, Nathan ordered food and they ate sitting on the studio floor, surrounded by canvases and the smell of paint and turpentine. It felt different from before, more honest somehow. The air had been cleared and what remained felt solid. "Can I ask you something?" Juliana said. "The small paintings you were showing at the community galleries, were those real? Or was that part of the act?" "They were real," Nathan said firmly. "I painted those during my time away, and I showed them under my own name without any publicity or fanfare. I wanted to see if the work could stand on its own, if people would respond to it without the Nathan Novak brand attached. When you bought that first painting, when you said it moved you, that meant more than any six-figure sale I've ever made. Because I didn't know who you were. Because you saw the art first. You understand how rare that is in my world. Everyone I meet has preconceptions, expectations. You just saw paintings and responded honestly." Juliana thought about this. "So in a way, by not knowing, I gave you something you needed." "You gave me everything I needed," Nathan said quietly. They didn't fall into bed that night, didn't rush physical reconciliation. Instead, Nathan called a car for Juliana and walked her down to the street, kissing her forehead softly. "Thank you for giving me another chance," he said. "Thank you for being honest finally." "Always," he promised. "From now on, always." Over the next few months, they rebuilt their relationship piece by piece. Nathan was true to his word, transparent about everything from his finances to his schedule to his feelings. He introduced Juliana to his world, taking her to gallery openings and art shows, though she noticed he seemed more relaxed at smaller, independent venues. "I've been thinking about changing how I work," Nathan told her one night as they walked home from dinner. "I don't want to be beholden to the big galleries anymore. I want to have more control over what I create and where it's shown." "What would that look like?" "Maybe opening my own gallery. A place that supports emerging artists, gives them the opportunities I had to have. I could show my work there too, but the focus would be on building community, not just selling to the highest bidder." "I love that idea," Juliana said. "Would you help me? You have such a good eye for what works, for how to present things. I'd value your input." It felt different this time, him asking for her help. Before, she'd been supporting what she thought was a struggling artist. Now, she was partnering with someone who had resources and experience, contributing her own skills and perspective to a shared vision. They found a space in Brooklyn, a former textile factory with good bones and lots of natural light. Nathan bought it outright, and they spent weekends painting walls and installing lighting, building something together from the ground up. "This is what I wanted," Nathan said one Saturday, paint splattered across his old jeans, his hair dusty from sanding floors. "Not the fancy openings or the critical acclaim, but this, creating something meaningful with someone I love." Juliana, equally messy in work clothes, crossed the empty gallery space and kissed him. "I love you too, even though you're a disaster who lies about being poor." "Ex-liar," Nathan corrected. "Reformed character, completely honest now." "Mostly honest," Juliana teased. "You didn't tell me you couldn't cook when you ruined that pasta dinner." "I can cook. That was just an ambitious night." They laughed, and it felt easy, natural. The hurt had healed, replaced by something stronger because they'd fought for it. The gallery opened in the spring, almost a year after they'd first met. Nathan called it Gray Light Gallery as a tribute to Juliana, and she tried not to cry at the gesture. They showcased emerging artists alongside Nathan's newer work, and the opening was packed with a mix of art world elite and young artists just starting out. "This is perfect," Michelle told Juliana, surveying the crowd. "You two really did something special here." "We did," Juliana agreed, watching Nathan talk enthusiastically with a young painter about technique. He was in his element, mentoring and encouraging rather than competing. Late that night, after everyone had left and they'd locked up the gallery, Nathan pulled Juliana into the center of the empty space. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no music. We don't need music." They swayed together in the silence, just the two of them in the gallery they'd built together. Outside, the city hummed with life, but in that moment, everything was perfect and quiet and theirs. "Marry me," Nathan said against her hair. Juliana pulled back to look at him. "What? Marry me?" "I know we said we'd take things slow, rebuild trust, but Jules, I've never been more sure of anything. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building things and making art and falling asleep next to you every night. I want it all. You're serious. Completely serious." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold band with a single diamond, elegant and understated. "I had this made 3 months ago, but I was waiting for the right moment. This feels right." Juliana looked at the ring, then at Nathan's face, open and vulnerable and full of love. She thought about the journey they'd taken, the lies and the truth, the breaking and the rebuilding. She thought about who they'd become individually and together. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Nathan's face broke into the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been made just for her. Which, she realized, it had been. They married that summer in a small ceremony at the gallery, surrounded by friends and family and art. Juliana wore a simple white dress, and Nathan wore a gray suit that matched his eyes. Michelle was her maid of honor, and Nathan's childhood best friend stood as his best man. "I'm so glad you lied about being poor," Juliana told him as they stood at the makeshift altar. Nathan laughed. "That's not usually how love stories go." "Ours isn't a usual love story." "No," he agreed. "It's better." The ceremony was short and sweet, focusing on the promises they made to each other. To be honest always, to support each other's dreams, to build a life based on love and respect and partnership. When the officiant pronounced them married, Nathan kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. The reception was joyful and chaotic, with toasts that made them laugh and cry. Nathan's mother, who'd flown in from upstate, cornered Juliana at one point. "Thank you," she said, squeezing Juliana's hands. "For what?" "For bringing my son back to himself." After his father died, Nathan threw himself into work, into success, like he was running from something. But with you, he stopped running. He's happy again, really happy. "He makes me happy too," Juliana said. "I can see that. You're good for each other." That night, in the hotel room Nathan had booked for their wedding night, Juliana stood by the window looking out at the city. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the first time I saw your painting. How it stopped me in my tracks, made me feel something I couldn't name. I had no idea that buying one piece of art would change my entire life." "Best $1,200 you ever spent, definitely." She turned in his arms. "Though I feel like I should get a refund now that I know you didn't actually need the money." "Too late," Nathan said. "No returns, no exchanges. You're stuck with me now." "Good," Juliana whispered. "That's exactly what I want." They spent their honeymoon in Italy, visiting museums and galleries, eating incredible food and drinking too much wine. Nathan sketched constantly, filling notebooks with images of Juliana against various backdrops. Juliana soaked it all in, storing up memories like treasure. "I want to paint you here," Nathan said one afternoon as they stood on a balcony overlooking Florence. "The light is perfect." "You've painted me 100 times," Juliana protested, "and I'll paint you 100 more. You're my favorite subject." When they returned to New York, they settled into married life with the same ease they'd found living together before. The gallery was doing well, representing a dozen artists and selling steadily. Nathan continued creating, but now he painted what he wanted rather than what he thought would sell. "I'm happier with my work now than I've ever been," he told Juliana one evening as they ate takeout in the gallery office. "Taking that time away, meeting you, learning to separate my identity from my success, it changed everything." "Do you ever regret it? The way we started?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I regret hurting you, lying to you, but I don't regret the path that led us here." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Juliana said. A year into their marriage, Juliana got a promotion to executive editor, overseeing an entire imprint of literary fiction. It was everything she'd worked toward, but it also meant longer hours and more stress. Nathan supported her completely, bringing dinner to her office when she worked late, rubbing her shoulders when the tension got too bad. "I feel like I'm neglecting you," Juliana said one night, exhausted after a particularly brutal day. "You're not neglecting me. You're pursuing your passion, and I love watching you succeed. We're partners, Jules. We support each other's dreams. Even when those dreams mean eating takeout at midnight in my office. Especially then," Nathan said, kissing her temple. 2 years after they married, Juliana realized she was late. At first, she thought it was stress from work, but when another week passed, she bought a test. The positive results sent her into a tailspin of emotions, excitement and terror mixing equally. She told Nathan that evening, presenting him with the positive test like it was a piece of art. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby," Juliana confirmed. Nathan picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're going to be parents. Jules, we're going to be parents." The pregnancy was surprisingly easy. Juliana worked up until 2 weeks before her due date, editing manuscripts and mentoring younger editors. Nathan painted nursery furniture and read parenting books with the same intensity he brought to his art. Their daughter was born on a snowy December morning, healthy and loud and absolutely perfect. They named her Claire, and Nathan cried when the nurse placed her in his arms for the first time. "She's so small," he whispered, awestruck. "She's perfect," Juliana said from the hospital bed, exhausted but happy. "Just like her mother." Being parents changed them in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Nathan cut back on commissions to spend more time at home, and Juliana learned to set better boundaries at work. They navigated sleepless nights and diaper changes together, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating every milestone. "I never knew I could be this tired and this happy at the same time," Juliana said one night, rocking Claire back to sleep at 3 in the morning. Nathan appeared in the doorway, rumpled and half asleep. "Want me to take over?" "No, I've got her. Go back to sleep." But Nathan came into the nursery anyway, wrapping an arm around Juliana as she rocked their daughter. They stood there together, watching Claire's little face relax into sleep, and Juliana felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this life they'd built. When Claire was 6 months old, Nathan surprised Juliana with a painting. It showed the 3 of them in the nursery, the scene from that 3 in the morning moment, captured in soft colors and gentle brushstrokes. He titled it Home. "When did you paint this?" Juliana asked, tears streaming down her face. "I've been working on it for weeks, during nap times and late at night. I wanted to capture this moment, this feeling. We've built something beautiful, Jules. Not just the gallery or our careers, but this family, this life. It started with me lying to you, but it became the most honest thing I've ever experienced. I love you," Juliana said. "I love you so much. I love you too. Thank you for seeing past my mistakes to who I really was underneath. Thank you for giving me the chance to become the man you deserved." "You already were that man," Juliana said. "You just needed to believe it yourself." As Claire grew, she showed artistic talent just like her father. By the time she was 3, she was covering everything in crayon drawings and demanding to help in Nathan's studio. Nathan was patient with her, teaching her about colors and shapes, encouraging her creativity. "She's got your talent," Juliana told him, watching Claire carefully color within the lines of one of her drawings. "She's got your determination," Nathan countered. "That's the important part." The gallery continued to thrive, becoming known as a place that nurtured emerging talent. Nathan occasionally showed his own work there, but mostly he focused on mentoring younger artists, giving them the support and opportunities he'd had to fight for. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they closed the gallery for the day and went back to the small community space where they'd first met. It was still there, still showcasing local artists, though the purple-haired girl behind the desk had been replaced by a young man with impressive tattoos. "This is where it started," Juliana said, standing in front of the window where she'd first seen Nathan's cityscape. "Best day of my life," Nathan said. "Well, tied with the day we got married and the day Claire was born. What would you have done if I hadn't come into the gallery that day?" "I would have found another way to meet you. The universe wanted us together." "That's very romantic for someone who started our relationship with lies," Juliana teased. "I've had years to work on my romantic game," Nathan said, pulling her close. "You've trained me well." They kissed in the gallery, surrounded by art and possibility, just like they had years before. And when they pulled apart, Juliana saw their reflection in the gallery window, a family now instead of 2 individuals, and she knew that every twist and turn of their story had been worth it. That night, after putting Claire to bed, they sat on their couch, the same couch where Nathan had first told Juliana he loved her. The cityscape painting still hung on the wall, though now it was surrounded by family photos and Claire's artwork. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Juliana asked. "If you told me the truth from the start, all the time," Nathan admitted. "Maybe we would have ended up here anyway, or maybe you would have run in the opposite direction. I'll never know, and I'm glad I don't. This version, the messy, complicated version, is ours." "It is messy," Juliana agreed, "but it's also pretty wonderful. The best things usually are." Years passed, and their story became the foundation of their family lore. Claire grew up hearing about how Daddy had pretended to be poor, and how Mommy had forgiven him, though they always framed it as a lesson about honesty and second chances. She'd roll her eyes at the romantic parts, but Juliana could see she loved the story anyway. The gallery expanded, opening a 2nd location in Brooklyn, then a 3rd in Queens. Nathan's work remained sought after, but he was selective about commissions, only taking projects that genuinely interested him. Juliana continued rising in the publishing world, eventually becoming publisher of her imprint, making decisions about which books would be published and how they'd be promoted. They bought a house in Park Slope with a yard for Claire and a studio for Nathan and an office for Juliana. It was chaotic and wonderful, filled with art and books and love. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan took Juliana back to Italy, just the 2 of them while his mother watched Claire. They revisited the spots from their honeymoon, older now but no less in love. "I have something for you," Nathan said one evening as they sat on a balcony in Florence, the same one where he'd wanted to paint her years before. He handed her a small wrapped package, and inside was a leather journal filled with sketches. Juliana recognized them immediately as images from throughout their relationship. Her reading by the window, laughing at something over dinner, holding baby Claire, working at her desk. Years of moments captured in Nathan's skilled hands. "This is our story," Nathan said. "The real version without filters or lies, just us building a life together." "It's beautiful," Juliana whispered, turning pages and seeing their love story unfold. "Though I think you've made me prettier than I actually am." "Impossible," Nathan said. "I paint what I see, and I see the most beautiful woman in the world." "Still working on that romantic game," Juliana teased, but she was crying, moved by the gift and the thoughtfulness behind it. That night, lying in bed in their hotel room, Juliana reflected on how far they'd come. From that first meeting in a community gallery to this moment in Florence, married with a daughter and careers they loved, and a future stretching bright before them. The lie that started everything had been wrong, but it had led them here, to this perfect, imperfect life. "Thank you," she whispered to Nathan in the darkness. "For what? For being imperfect, for making mistakes and learning from them, for loving me enough to change and grow, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for seeing me," Nathan said. "For looking at my art that first day and seeing something real, for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it, for loving me anyway." "Always," Juliana promised. "No matter what, always." And as they fell asleep in each other's arms, the lights of Florence twinkling beyond their window, Juliana knew that some lies could lead to truth. Some mistakes could become blessings, and some love stories, no matter how they started, could have perfect endings after all.